Welcome to Brea Talks, an insider's look into topics that affect your experiences in the city of Brea. Whether you live, work, or play here, we're bringing you the information you need to better understand your city. So now, we invite you to listen in as Brea Talks. Hello and welcome. I'm Dan Fenstermaker, and today Brea Talks wildfires and what to do. For context, if you're listening to this episode down the road, we are just off the heels of the devastating wildfires that swept through and destroyed much of Los Angeles and Los Angeles County area. And for those of you that are listening from afar and aren't familiar with where exactly the city of Brea is, we're about 45 minutes southeast of LA and definitely felt the winds and gusts that drove these fires to their immense size and speed. Our goal today is to discuss what to do if something like this should happen in our community, and what to do regardless of where you live to harden your home in the event a wildfire starts, and how best to prepare your family, pets, and valuables for a swift, efficient, and safe evacuation should you need to evacuate. We are privileged to have three very knowledgeable guests joining us today, all from the Brea Fire Department. Previous contributor and friend of the show, Emergency Preparedness Coordinator Lisa Keyworth. Lisa, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Our Fire Marshal, Nicole Pesqueira. Nicole, thank you.
Thank you.
And Fire Captain Chris Marvin, just recently back from a strike team fighting the Palisades Fire. Captain, thank you, sir.
Good morning. Thank you.
This is obviously a timely and pertinent topic, and one that I think everyone will benefit. So once again, thank you for sharing your knowledge on this. Let's get right into it. I do want to be clear before we start, the goal of our podcast has never been to sensationalize or scare people, but to give our listeners the best possible information we can. That being said, this information is going to be the best we can give you, and it might be a little intense. So let's just say the threat is very real and should be taken seriously. So Captain Marvin, let's start with you. Let me ask you, how real is the threat here in Brea?
So the threat is always there, whether you live in the area or just outside the area. What I wanted to start this morning is just let everybody know what the wildland-urban interface is. We call it the WUI in our term. And it's basically a human development next to an undeveloped wildland area. It could be grass, brush, forest, anything along those lines. And what we can do to minimize this threat is to work together, homeowners and the fire departments statewide in a partnership, if you will, creating a defensible space, which is basically a buffer between the home and the vegetation. And then what this does is it slows the effects of the fire if the fire is to back in to the residents or the community, such as Brea Canyon.
Sure. So it buys you a little more time.
Yes.
Sure.
And if the community does its part, it makes it a lot easier for us to do ours, right? Because if there's less fuel, less things to burn, then we can concentrate on the things that we're out there for.
Right. Okay. So definitely a message to those that live in this area right on the border, to do what they can to help you guys do the best you can.
Yes.
Let's talk about some terminology. As we discuss these topics further in detail, and even as you listen to the news every day, you might hear words or phrases, but it's important to know and understand exactly what these terms mean. I mean, in prepping for this particular episode, I've learned a ton. Lisa, let's start with you. Red flag warning. People think of red flag warning, they think of heat, but that is actually not the full tale. What is a red flag warning?
So basically, a red flag warning is a combination of things. It's low humidity, it's the winds. Typically, it's warmer temperatures, but as we saw back, in early January, they actually had a cold Santa Ana wind event. Cold wind coming from Canada. It's a different event, but the low humidity was still less than 10%. We still had some really strong winds. And so any combination of those, it's a combination dry fuels, weather conditions, and it supports extreme fire danger. Now, typically we talk about spring and fall, February to April and October to December. Obviously, we're in January and we're still having, these events.
Right.
So fire seasons become to where it's a year-round thing, but
Sure.
the red flag is specific to your humidity, winds, and typically warmer temperatures, but not always.
Right. No, exactly. And as I mentioned, people think red flag warning, they think of heat, they think of summer, or Santa Ana wind season. But to have a red flag warning in January, certainly something that we should be definitely preparing for year round now.
Correct.
Public Safety Power Shutoff, or PSPS. Talk a little bit about that.
So that is when the power company, for us it's Southern California Edison, they preemptively shut off the power in high fire severity areas. So like Captain Marvin talked about that WUI, the wildland urban interface. That's the areas that they target. And so what it is, a lot of the fires in Northern California in previous years were caused by down power lines or arcing wires. And so what they do is they'll shut off a segment of a circuit or a whole circuit that runs through these high fire severity areas in anticipation of a wind event.
So in case there's some damage to these power lines, they are not energized.
Correct. Okay. And so they'll notify the public 2 to 4 days out and let them know there's the potential, that they're watching the red flag. They notify public safety ahead of time that they're going to be shutting them off. The only problem with is people don't realize is it's not like a brownout where the power's out for half an hour or an hour. These are typically long-term events. So the power will stay out until the wind event is over, and then 3 to 8 hours after. What people don't realize is they have to go out and visually inspect every inch of the line, because if there's a branch or something else on the line when they re-energize it, there's still the potential for fire.
Sure, and all of that was for nothing.
Correct.
Right.
And so they do their best to, notify the public that it's coming. If you live further down south in the city, you may not ever see these. They're typically, in our canyons and the abutting areas.
I see. And then just when we were talking about this and prepping for this episode, you had made the comment that when something like this happens, don't go fill your refrigerator.
Yeah, so we had a couple of back-to-back events, and so people thought it was over, and they do all their grocery shopping and fill the fridge again, knowing another red flag event is coming, and the power gets shut off again. Right. So something to prepare for. If you see those notices from Edison, it may be the time, if you work from home, you have a medical need, or, you have an electric vehicle even, might be the time to go stay somewhere else, so you have the, power that you need, and then go back home after it's been re-energized if that's an option for you.
That's a good tip. All right. Okay, so Lisa, staying with you, evacuation types. We have evacuation warnings and we have evacuation orders. Let's talk about evacuation warnings.
So these used to be called voluntary. Everybody used to hear voluntary and mandatory evacuations. Voluntary is, it's probably a good idea to start packing up your stuff just in case it gets closer. And then the mandatory was, okay, now you need to leave. To be consistent across the state, they now have evacuation warning, which is our old voluntary evacuations. And then we have evacuation order, which is the more mandatory. So if you hear an evacuation warning, it's probably a good idea to start getting your car ready, loading up. If it takes you a little longer for mobility issues or anything else, maybe you leave during the morning. When it becomes an order, that's the time where you really need to leave. If you haven't left already, now's your opportunity. You should leave.
I had some friends actually in Highland Park, and the Eaton fire was blowing their direction, and they were under a warning, but the air quality was actually so bad they just left. So, something to consider too, depending on which way the wind is blowing. Definitely don't wait until the order to pack up.
If you ask me, I'm always going to tell you when it's a warning, you should leave anyway. Because of traffic, because of everybody trying to leave the same way at the same time. I think Captain Marvin will talk about it a little more, but when you're trying to leave and there's that many people leaving, you saw the news broadcast of Palisades Fire where people were getting stuck in traffic or just couldn't get out. Right. And you don't want to be that person.
Right. Okay, go bags and emergency kits.
So our go bags are kind of the grab and go. That's the grab and go. It's all packed. It's ready. It's got your prescription medications. It's got some clothes. It's got, don't forget your pets. A lot of people leave with their pets and forget all the pet supplies. Those are the ones with your important documents. Your driver's license, social security card. People didn't think about it, but your insurance documents. If your house burns down, what's your insurance policy number? You have those documents with you. If you're tech savvy, throw it on a thumb drive, put it in a Ziploc bag, and it's ready to go. Emergency kits is more the stuff for when you're staying put. That's your, at least 3 days worth of food, water. Same thing, the medication, whatever other things you might need if you need to shelter in place or stay put is the emergency kit versus the grab and go of your go bag.
Absolutely. Captain.
We use the 5 Ps, and I actually add 6 for the pets, like Lisa said. But it's people, prescriptions, papers, personal needs and priceless items.
Oh, okay.
Whatever you can get in your car to go.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
an important part of that too is the pre-planning. You know, when you get to these orders and everybody's trying to, well, where's the wedding album? Where's this? Well, those things should be predetermined and in a location where if you had to leave, you just have to grab that box of keepsakes and throw them in the car versus scrambling to find where you put something.
Sure. These are all great tips for this. So just to be clear, go bag is literally go. Emergency kit is more likely another type of disaster, shelter in place or stay put. Maybe you have a smaller emergency kit in your vehicle, which you probably should have anyways.
Work, home, and vehicle.
Yeah. Okay, Nicole, hi. Are you still here?
I am still here.
Are you still with us? Evacuation plans. Okay, so it's go time. Maybe it's wildfire, or maybe it's just your house. Let's talk about home evacuation plans.
Yes. What people don't realize is when a home fire hits, you have about 2 to 3 minutes to get out. The way fuels are, furniture, everything, how it's made these days, you don't have as much time to get out. So you need to have that plan. And you should have 2 ways out of each room. You should have a written plan, and you should be practice getting it within that 2 to 3 minute time frame. Okay. You want to get low. You want to move to the exits, and choose a safe meeting place, a safe distance from the home. You also want to have a plan for your children, for your pets, anyone that might need extra assistance, and make sure everyone knows to not go back inside a building if it's on fire.
I see. Yeah. Are there any tips for single family residents where they live upstairs and maybe the fire is near the staircase, then it's a one staircase out? Is there any kind of, what would you recommend in that situation?
Yes, they absolutely can consider a plan for going out the windows. They do sell ladders, so that's an option too, and making sure that anyone in those rooms
Ladders
knows how to,
designed for
the window
for a fire escape.
Yeah, little fire ladders they have. Yes, so you can actually practice with those. Practice, throwing them out the window and making sure everyone knows how to set that up.
Okay, that's good to know. Captain, we're out of the house now. We've made it in our 2 to 3 minute time. Now we got to get out of the neighborhood. Talk to us a little bit about how important it is to have an evacuation plan for the neighborhood itself.
Yeah, so in the event that you're evacuated or choose to get out early, like Lisa talked about before, the warning time versus the order, and you get out early, you're ready to go, right? You have everything packed, you have your 6 Ps ready to go, and you can just leave. You know how to get out of your area, out of your neighborhood. All of a sudden it turns and now you have the evacuation order and everybody's trying to leave at once. So imagine you're in your driveway pulling out and everybody else is doing the same, right? So if you have like a watch duty app, which we'll go over coming up, it has evacuation and which way to go. If you see a police officer and he's saying go this way, but you know a back route, you want to go the way that the police officer tells you. You don't want to try to shortcut it because probably everybody else is shortcutting that way, right?
I see.
But all of a sudden you get to the end of the street and like Lisa talked about, you have traffic and now you get wind, now you get fire on the hillside, and now you start to panic, right? And then people are like, I'm out, and then they start to go. And in the Palisades, at the bottom of Sunset, there was a crash, and it stopped people from being able to get out onto PCH and leave. So they actually had to get out of their vehicles and run. So imagine being in that situation, right?
Yeah.
But the solution is, when the warning comes, that's when we leave. We have all our stuff ready to go. And if you've lived in the area, you've done this more than once. Right. So you have all your stuff, you have your 6 Ps all lined out. Okay, it's a warning. Let's get in the car, let's go. Real calm, cool, collected, and then you make it to where you need to be.
Okay. Let's talk about preventative measures. Nicole, I already used this term earlier, home hardening. What does that mean?
Great question, Dan. So home hardening actually came into fire code back in 2010. So homes built around 2010 and beyond should be in these areas, in the high fire, very high fire, and moderate zones. They all should be considered hardened, and that they have they're built to withstand a wildfire incident.
Oh.
And that includes having defensible space, a fuel modification plan, which means having specific plants you can have, stuff that you can't have, irrigated areas, and it's all very specific to having that the clearances to the structure. So if your house was built around 2010 and even to more recent than today, then you should be in pretty good shape, as long as you didn't add any plants that you didn't know about or anything crazy like that.
Sure.
But that goes with the maintenance on a home, right? And once you have a home in this area, you do have to continue the maintenance process. Now, those homes that were built before, which in Brea we have many that were built before that standard went into effect. There are low-cost ways to achieve this, and then, of course, you can spend the actual money to really, truly invest and actually harden the home to the standard of 7A, which is what we recommend. But if you don't have that money up front now, there are ways you can do that, and it's from simple as having a Class A rated fire roof, making sure you install non-combustible gutter covers on the gutters to prevent any accumulation of leaves and debris in the gutter, install ember and flame resistant vents, and making sure as you're replacing your siding or deck that you use compliant non-combustible ignition resistant type siding. So those are some options. We'll be able to provide a link so they can actually check out all of the ways to actually harden the home. But it's pretty easy. Another one I like to recommend as well is maintaining that zone 0. And that zone 0 is 0 to 5 feet from the home, making sure nothing combustible, no plants, really keeping it kind of clean around that exterior of your structure. That definitely can aid in help preventing that fire from actually getting to the home.
Got it. Okay, so shrubs and hedges and stuff right up against the home, not a great idea. Try to keep those 5 feet away from the home.
Correct.
And okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know. Okay, so that's it for terminology. Hopefully, you have a little bit better understanding about those terms when you hear them. Captain, let's go back. We talked already a little bit about the Palisades Fire that you just got back from. How about just some takeaways in terms of what you saw, what you learned? I mean, how long you've been a firefighter for how many years?
27 years in the city.
27 years for the city of Brea. Well, thank you, sir, for your service.
You're welcome.
So in 27 years, I'm sure you saw some stuff out in the Palisades that you had a lot of takeaways from. You want to share some of those with us?
Sure. So as I talked about earlier, it's one of the things that's beyond our control sometimes. When drought conditions are dry, which obviously California has been dry for years, even though we had some really good wet seasons. And the winds move in. We have a wind event come in. Red flag warning comes in, and a fire starts and spreads rapidly. The Palisades Fire had 60-mile-an-hour sustained winds with gusts of 100.
That's crazy.
So you could just think about that. So when it comes to the warnings and the orders, is that, there's been fires I've been on, including this one, where they say that the fires move 3 football fields a second, right? Or 5 football fields in a minute. However you want to, that's pretty fast.
That's insane.
If you think the fire's pretty far away, it can get there in a quick second.
Sure.
Right? So, and at that point, with Palisades and it being so far away, from the actual interface of where the brush met the homes, it's unfathomable how fast that fire is moving, how strong it is, how hot it is.
Yeah.
And it's basically creating its own weather.
Yeah.
And the wind's just blowing it as hard as it can.
Stuff just news footage does not paint the picture enough, does not do it justice to show just how fast.
Right. And at that point, especially, for LA City and LA County that were there first, it's life safety. We have to get everybody out.
Right.
We know with our experience and the wind that we're not going to stop this fire from moving forward.
Right.
And so when that happens and that's occurred, we just need to get everybody out as fast as we can and then go back and do what we can with the homes and save what we can.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm hearing here is if there's a fire nearby and the winds are to that degree, you get out.
Yes.
Just go.
100%.
Okay. Let's give the listeners something to sleep easier with, and tell us what practices the City of Brea Fire Department has put in place or is putting in place to put us in the best position to deal with a wildfire that might occur nearby.
Sure. So our department has a highly detailed operational plan during a wildland fire, as do every department in the county and the state. And with that, we train annually with neighboring departments in the county and outside the county, including communications. Communications has always been hard because you have one department that uses these frequencies and other departments that use these frequencies. So we've come up with a common frequency package. So whenever we go in Orange County, LA County, we're on the same frequency so we can communicate. Because in the past, that's been a big issue. So wildland seasons become year-round, like Lisa said, especially with our fuel conditions being less than dry, brittle, if you will. And with the weed abatement and the things we do annually, creating that buffer, that 100-foot between the actual brush, things like that, it improves our chances. Here in the city also, too, we make sure that all of our fire dirt rows are cleared throughout the year, not just once a year, because you get overgrowth in 6 months, right? Especially if we get a little bit of rain. We work very closely with the residents within our urban interface communities to make sure they are ready to go, they're educated, they have their 5 Ps, they know what we're going to do, they know where their evacuation routes are, which ways to go, things like this. And when red flag warning occurs, we basically put in place in our areas, we add firefighters to the engines that we already have on a daily basis, and we deploy a wildland engine with an additional battalion chief just in case something does happen. It doesn't take away from our 911 calls for regular service. We basically have our firefighters on the fire itself, and then we have firefighters that can respond to any 911 calls that come in during a fire.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so calling in extra troops.
Yes.
For a red flag warning. Nicole, you were talking in prep about some AI cameras?
Yes. So we're looking at right now that this new technology, right? We're all hearing about AI and how great of a resource this could be, that they have now cameras that we could possibly put in the canyon. And actually, it would be a early detection to be able to notify dispatch right away if these cameras actually see smoke. They read the smoke, they read the fire. It's going to go automatically to a person who's going to then call dispatch.
Picks up a significant heat signature and triggers an alarm.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yes. So we're looking at that right now, actually meeting with them in the next couple of weeks. So that could be something that we might see here in town. And they have different options, whether we purchase or we can actually just rent them for like those times when we have those extreme weather events, the wind events and red flag warnings. So options, and we're looking at that. But there's a lot of new technologies coming out, especially on the heels of these fires. So it'll be interesting to see what else we hear and what legislation might be proposed over the next year, because that could really change how we do things.
For sure. Lisa, you have a CERT class to help better equip our community. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so CERT is our Community Emergency Response Team. The training is actually a FEMA curriculum, so it's the same across the entire country. It's 20 hours. It's free to Brea residents, 16 and above. If you're 16 or 17, you have to attend with a parent. But basically, it's basic disaster skills, how to prepare a go bag, some basic disaster medical, how to splint a broken arm, how to put on a tourniquet. We go through fire safety. Actually, Nicole teaches our fire safety section and how to use a fire extinguisher in your home, just to better prepare yourself. And so folks can take the 20-hour class. They can continue on and be a volunteer for the city and be activated during a disaster, or they can take the class and say, thank you very much, I just want to go take care of my family, and that's okay. But the class starts February 25th. It's Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and then we finish on a Saturday morning on March 15th. Like I said, free to Brea residents, and we can put the link, but registration's open now.
Okay. For
that. We also have things, Captain Marvin mentioned it earlier, but Watch Duty is an app for folks to download. Watch Duty, when there's a wildfire occurs, it pops up on there. The evacuation zones are on there. If you go on there now, even for Palisades, you can see recovery centers. You can see where food distribution is. All those things get mapped. But it's a really useful tool that even we use, watching some of these fires and the details about those fires. And if you have not signed up for Alert OC, if you live anywhere in Orange County, Alert OC is the mass notification system used throughout the entire county, including Brea. Whether it's an evacuation, whether it's a boil water notice, whatever happens to need to go out, all we get are landline phone numbers automatically, like old school landline phone numbers.
Who has those?
Yeah, I wish more people did.
Sure.
But you need to opt in your cell phone, text messages, emails. And so if there's a major event, that's, how we'll notify.
Right.
But just for peace of mind, you're looking for peace of mind for our residents right now. A lot of people during those public safety power shutoffs in the canyon, they were without power for 40 hours during the last wind event. And, cell towers go down. Everything that's
those
run
need
by power, right?
Yeah.
So having that old school landline phone, folks still have the ability to call 911 if they need help. But something people may want to consider is getting a generator. Some other way for them to have some type of power or internet source or something. But the peace of mind comes in the fact that if we do an evacuation, Alert OC is nice, but it's not our only way we're going to notify.
Right.
We're required to go out in person, drive the neighborhood, loudspeakers, door knocking, making sure that residents are aware that there's an evacuation.
Right.
So even without power, without telephones, you're still going to get a notification
Sure.
in person of an evacuation. Obviously, if time doesn't permit, we're out there fighting a fire. You may not get a door knock, but we will go out to these neighborhoods and make sure that everybody's notified. So just because your power's out doesn't mean you're going to be out of the loop.
Right.
When there is an event, please go to our social media sites for the official city pages, whether it's the city, police, or fire. I know a lot of these Nextdoor and other apps are fantastic, but typically we want to make sure the information's vetted.
Absolutely.
So City of Brea has an account on Nextdoor. We all have a presence on Facebook, Instagram, X, all those things. But we want the official information is what people share so
Right.
that we're not scaring people or giving bad information and trying to correct it later.
Absolutely.
So, tag those sites, make sure you're following these different pages so that if something were to occur, you guys can stay in the know.
That's excellent. Excellent. Okay. Yeah. And I think just to piggyback off that, it is a partnership. We had mentioned that earlier that I think the takeaway there is, we will make sure that the information gets out to the residents, but it is also on the residents to do their part.
Correct.
Whether it's hardening their home or evacuating and not waiting. A few other things that Brea Fire Department is doing. Nicole, why don't you talk a little bit about weed abatement and inspections?
Sure. So when I became fire marshal a little over a year ago, I had known that we had been very reactive only to complaint inspections, but I wanted to make sure we beefed up our brush clearance inspection program. So as of now, we have an inspector dedicated to doing brush clearance inspections 2 times a year out in our high and very high fire severity zones. So he's out there and he's enforcing 100-foot clearance from any structure, as well as a 10-foot minimum roadway requirement for clearance. We're also allowed to go further than that if we deem necessary. So that's one of the steps we're taking. Also, we offer home hazard assessments, so we can actually go into your home, take a look at everywhere, anything from smoke alarm to carbon monoxide detection placement, any sort of electrical safety issues we may see, helping you with a fire escape plan, helping you store your flammable and combustible liquids, and of course, looking at that exterior of the structure, especially in those high and very high fire severity zone areas, trying to let you know what you can do to possibly make your home safer and hardening tips.
That's awesome. And how much does that inspection cost the Brea residents?
Brea residents get that for free. They
What?
just need to give us a call.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, we
Free
can set that
inspections.
up right. It's great.
That is awesome. Well, that's very cool. And I'm sure we'll go a very long way. So please, folks, don't hesitate. It's free. Lastly, I want to talk about when a disaster like we saw just about a month ago happens, how the community comes together, sometimes in a huge way. And there is an overwhelming amount of donations. I want to touch on this lastly. Lisa, we were talking about how we found ourselves in a bit of a situation where we were literally overwhelmed with donations from the community, which sounds like a good problem to have. But talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, giving is wonderful most of the time. I mean, we have a really generous community.
Absolutely.
These fires happen and they started asking for certain things, which is fantastic. The problem lies in that, with our resources being tied up with red flag and being on the ready and being overwhelmed with donations, We still have to have a mechanism to get them to LA to distribute. You know, and it's difficult because a lot of times, like look at Katrina, people just started dumping all their clothes and everything else to where the donations became a disaster in and of themselves. It's a lot to manage. So what we recommend is if there's an event somewhere else, reach out to local groups that may be taking donations up there or a reputable, place to make a monetary donation. That's probably going to go a lot further than some of the other items that were received. Or donate somewhere locally that was impacted.
Right.
Because some of the cities out here, like I said, I love the generosity. It's incredibly difficult and taxes us and having to try to get that to where it's needed.
Right.
And they're very specific on what their needs are. So
Right.
if they're asking for baby diapers and if you drop off all your old clothes, that's not really helpful to the cause that they're
Sure.
working for.
Sure.
So just be very mindful of what you're donating, who you're donating it to.
Right.
And donate it to the areas that are requesting it, not necessarily what's local to you.
Sure.
Unless there's a request made by a local agency to
Right.
help somewhere else.
Right, of course. In
But-
which case we would definitely push that out, push a notification or an advertisement out of where we were collecting these donations and what they were going to.
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent.
We don't want to kill the giving spirit. It's just
Right. No.
we want to make sure it gets to where it's supposed to go and
Absolutely.
most effectively.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to say thank you again to all three of you. This was all great information, and again, I think that unfortunately, after the fact, it's a tremendous wake up call that these fires occurred in January and cold winds, and yet here we are with the looking at the devastation that we are, and it's just so important to stay vigilant. So thank you for helping the community kind of learn a little bit more about how to do just that. So thank you. That's it for this episode of Brea Talks. This episode and all episodes of Brea Talks can be heard wherever you get your podcast, as well as the City of Brea YouTube channel, Brea TV, and our new Brea TV app. And you can find on any major app store, wherever you get your apps. Don't forget to follow, like, subscribe, rate, and review. And we'll see you next time. Thanks again for listening in as Brea Talks.